Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. The NFL is here. The season is here. Later tonight, we will get our first meaningful game. Bills Rams, pretty big one, pretty good one. Pretty intriguing game for Seahawks fans as well, really. So, yeah, we're here. And we're just a few days away from finding out something about the Seahawks. So, exciting times, but I've got a couple more weekly videos to lay out going into the season. And for Thursdays going forward, I don't see any reason to mess with what worked really well last year. We're going to stick with pass coverage Thursday. We're going to continue to utilize PFR mostly to figure out which players on the Seahawks are actually giving stuff up in coverage. I really like these because during a football game, you get lost in the big picture sometimes because you can't help it. You're watching the game, you're watching your team. When your team is giving up a lot of long completions, then you're like, oh man, our team can't cover. And when your team is locking down on the back end, you're more likely to be like, wow, our team can really cover. We've got a great defensive backs. But while that's obviously the most important thing to you as a fan, I think that it's also very important to understand who is doing what individually. Let's make sure we actually single out the right people for exceptional or bad play. So that's why I like doing, continue to do it for as long as I'm doing this channel, because it's not something that a lot of people see as a default. Like when you think about box score stats in the NFL, for defensive players, you have like tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions, passes defensed. These are things in the box score. Things like targets, completions allowed, yards allowed, touchdowns allowed in coverage, QB rating allowed when targeted. You don't see those in the box score. We're not there yet. Certainly some websites, some aggregators track it, but it hasn't yet entered the mainstream. And I think keeping a good eye on what individual players are actually doing for your coverage really helps when you're trying to, at the end of the year, figure out, okay, whose fault is this really? Because I can say, yeah, it's the team's fault, but that's not really going to help me fix the issue. You can't replace everybody on defense when your defense is bad. So pass coverage Thursday is going to stick around. So it's basically like last year. If you guys were watching my videos last year, this should all look pretty familiar to you. We've got targets. This is the number of times a quarterback targeted you in coverage. Now, one thing to keep in mind about that stat, and really most of these stats, there is some subjectivity there. There were a couple plays last year, for instance, where I felt very confident that there was a long reception given up on Sidney Jones, and I believe it was PFF gave the completion to Sidney Jones, but then you had PFR give it to Jamal Adams because Jamal Adams tried to get over there to help cover up for Sidney and he couldn't get over there quite in time. So when I look at stuff like that, I am going to make a judgment call, especially when it's for a particularly big play because it can skew things so badly. There is a certain level of artistry here. It's not just everything is, point blank, obvious. It was on this guy, it was on that guy. There is going to be some subjectivity in these. And one person may look at a play and say, oh, that completion was on Jordan Brooks. Another person watches the same play and they'll say, no, that was Quandre Diggs' man. Especially when you're playing zone defenses, especially when you've got things like a man getting passed off to another man. You've got, double coverage sometimes. So understand that I'm mostly going to be utilizing PFR, but I am going to also be utilizing my own judgment of who was actually in coverage on a particular play. So we have targets, we have completions, pretty self-explanatory, and from that you can derive completion percentage. You have passing yards allowed, touchdowns allowed, interceptions. That is actually a box score stat. And QB rating against. So we want to drill down to the the real meaningful information here. So, as an example, I have the linebackers listed here. Jordan Brooks. He got destroyed in coverage last year. Gave up, by some metrics, over 1,000 yards in coverage. This year he's playing a different position. He's got a little bit of a different role. Things should be a lot better. So at the end of the year, if we look at Brooks and say, oh, he only allowed 600 yards in coverage. Oh, he was targeted 40% less than he was in 2021. Then we know we've made a good adjustment and the defense is at least partially doing what it was supposed to be doing. Cody Barton. On paper, he's supposed to be a good coverage linebacker. Will his coverage metrics back that up at the end of the year? Guys like Darrell Taylor, going to be playing with their hand up sometimes or standing up. How are they going to hold up when they're asked to do coverage stuff? Because as a 3-4 outside linebacker, you're going to be doing some of that. Can he do it? So you've got all the linebackers here. Nwosu. Guys like Ballore, Mafe, and Alton Robinson may not be doing a lot of coverage stuff. In fact, I think mostly we would very much want them not to. But it may happen a few times over the course of the season. So we've got them in the list. Cornerbacks, we got a bunch of them. Sidney Jones, Artie Burns, Tariq Woolen, Michael Jackson, Trey Brown whenever he gets back from the injury, Kobe, Justin, Coleman, Reed, and Ryan Neal. So there's obviously going to be some really interesting stuff around Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant because they're both rookies. And you can throw Michael Jackson in there as well because he's not a rookie, but he kind of feels like it because he played so little last year. And also, Sidney Jones, a player who got destroyed early in his Seattle career when he came in for, I believe it was Trey Flowers last year, but got progressively better with every game he played. Can he continue that pattern? Can he continue to improve to the point where by the end of the year he's going to get a big payday from somebody? So cornerbacks, pretty self-explanatory here, and safeties. You got Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs. You know they're going to be playing pretty much every snap. And this, one of the reasons why I really like this series is because it allows you to really narrow in on something like a Jamal Adams. Because what are the memes about Jamal Adams? A blitz boy. He can't cover. He's terrible in coverage. He gets beat like a drum in coverage. I did this last year, and as near as I could tell, Jamal Adams was playing really well in coverage, and when Ryan Neal was forced to come in for Jamal at the end of the year, he was significantly worse. So what a series like this will hopefully do is kind of push through the memes and actually get to the fact of the matter. And Jamal Adams was a great cover player in college, and he was great with the Jets. I don't believe he suddenly forgot how to do those things, so a series like this should help prove whether or not that's the case, or if maybe he is actually getting beat a bunch in coverage, especially now in this new defense where he should be asked to cover a little bit less and play more the style that made him a big-time player in New York. And we've also got Quandre Diggs, of course, who held up really well in coverage last year. And you've got Josh Jones. I don't know how much these guys are going to play, him and Blunt, but they're probably going to play some. Jones may get on the field when Jamal moves to linebacker if we're really going to do that. So if that's the case, he's going to get some snaps. And yeah, pretty simple weekly series, but I think it's meaningful. I think it's important. And I think there's a lot of knowledge to be imparted here. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Might stream during the game tonight on Twitch, but not sure. Either way, see you guys soon. Go Hawks.